He could buy anything, except time. The doctor told him he was dying. And in that moment, all his billions meant nothing. Ethan Callahan, the billionaire who ruled New York's skyline, felt his chest tighten as if the air itself had been stolen. His empire? Worthless. His billions? Powerless. What good was money when every heartbeat might be his last? In that cold moment, he saw the truth. No heir, no family, no love, only silence waiting at the end. But fate is cruel, and sometimes merciful. His savior would not be a socialite dripping in diamonds, but Grace Whitmore, a black woman the world overlooked, yet the only one strong enough to give him more than an heir, to give him a reason to live. What would you do if you had billions, but only 3 years to live? Would you cling to power, or risk it all for love? Hit subscribe now, and tell me in the comments what you think happens next. Ethan Callahan left the boardroom, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The skyline of New York glowed beyond the glass, a city alive with ambition. Yet, inside his chest, something cracked. A wave of dizziness struck him. The hallway tilted. His hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. Colleagues passed by, their eyes filled with respect, unaware the man they admired was fighting for balance. He forced a smile, straightened his tie, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Power meant nothing when the body refused to obey. For weeks, the spells had come. At first, he blamed stress, too many nights without sleep, too many deals chasing the next billion. But now, the truth pressed harder. Each step felt heavy, as if the floor itself wanted to swallow him. Outside the tall glass windows, New York sparkled with promise. Inside, Ethan felt only emptiness. What good was wealth when every heartbeat felt borrowed? He walked toward the elevator, the reflection staring back at him. A man in control, suit perfect, jaw sharp. But, behind the glass, he saw fear. The private clinic smelled of antiseptic and silence. The walls, pale and sterile, seemed to close in on him. Ethan sat on the leather chair, his jaw tight, his pulse racing. Dr. Harris entered, tablet in hand. His face was calm, too calm. He hesitated before speaking, and that hesitation told Ethan everything. "Your scans. They confirm it," the doctor said quietly. "A rare degenerative condition. It cannot be cured. We can only slow it. 3 years, maybe less." The words slammed into him like a fist. 3 years. 38 years old, in his prime, with an empire stretching across continents, and now reduced to a countdown. Ethan's throat tightened. He had fought rivals, conquered markets, crushed anyone who dared block his path, yet here he was, powerless before his own body. "Are you sure?" His voice cracked. Dr. Harris nodded. "I wish I wasn't." The hum of machines filled the silence. Ethan stared at the ceiling. He had always believed time was his ally. Now time had become his enemy. All the money, all the fame, none of it could buy him 1 more year. The drive back to his penthouse blurred. Neon lights streaked across the window, meaningless colors against the storm inside him. Ethan poured a glass of whiskey but did not drink. He stared at the photo on his desk. His mother, laughing with him on a beach long ago. The image pierced deeper than the diagnosis. Death itself didn't terrify him most. What gnawed at him was emptiness. No heir, no child, no one to carry the Callahan name. His empire would fall into the wrong hands. Damien's face flashed in his mind. The half-brother who lived recklessly, chasing women and gambling fortunes. If Ethan died without an heir, Damien would inherit it all. He would destroy everything Ethan built. The thought made his jaw clench, his chest burn. He could face death, but not Damien's victory. His reflection in the window looked back at him. A powerful man stripped bare, cornered by time. "You have to act," he told himself, "before it's too late." By morning, resolve hardened inside him. He adjusted his cufflinks, his mask of control back in place. But the decision he carried was anything but ordinary. Love was never part of his world. It was a weakness, a distraction. But legacy, that mattered. His name had to endure. He would find someone, not for romance, not for companionship, for one purpose, to give him an heir. The idea was ruthless, but ruthlessness had built his empire. Contracts, not emotions. Transactions, not promises. Yet a whisper lingered in the back of his mind. What if time runs out before you choose? He clenched his fist. No, he would choose. Quickly, deliberately. The paradox cut into him. A man who had everything now desperate for the one thing money could not buy naturally, a family. And so Ethan Callahan, billionaire, titan of hotels, walked into his next chapter not as a lover, not as a husband, but as a man, ready to purchase a future. The Harborview ballroom shimmered under crystal lights. Laughter rose, glasses clinked, and every eye turned to Ethan Callahan as he entered. The billionaire carried himself with the same cold authority that made him untouchable. Then it happened. A tray slipped, a crash of glass. Red wine splattered across his crisp white shirt. Gasps rippled through the room. The young waitress froze, cheeks burning, hands trembling as she dropped to her knees. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, grabbing at shards. Her dark hair fell loose from its bun, her hazel eyes wide with panic. The crowd waited for his fury. They expected him to shout, to have her fired on the spot. But Ethan crouched down beside her, the red stain spreading across his shirt. "It's just a shirt," he said softly, handing her a napkin. Their fingers brushed. For a fleeting second, something jolted inside him. Grace Whitmore blinked, startled by his calmness. She nodded quickly, cleaning the floor, refusing to beg. Ethan stood, silent under the curious eyes of the elite. Yet all he saw was her, the honesty in her gaze, raw and unguarded. And in that moment, the stain on his shirt became the least important thing in the room. Grace returned to her work, balancing trays as if nothing had happened. No apologies dragged on, no attempt to charm, only the determination to finish her shift. Ethan's eyes followed her across the ballroom. Most women he met rehearsed their smiles, calculated every word. Grace had no mask. She had only herself. When another glass toppled nearby, she didn't flinch. She cleaned it, smiled at the guests, moved on. Efficient, steady, unashamed of her role. The warmth in Ethan's chest unsettled him. He was used to admiration, to fear, to manipulation. But this was real. He lifted a glass of whiskey, watching her weave through the crowd. She wasn't beautiful in the polished, practiced way of society women. She was something rarer, authentic. The memory of her fingers brushing his lingered, absurdly vivid. He almost laughed at himself. A billionaire, shaken by a waitress? But, as she laughed softly with another server, her smile lighting her face, Ethan felt a pull stronger than pride, stronger than wealth. Grace Whitmore was different. And, for the first time in years, Ethan Callahan wanted to know more. The spell broke when a familiar voice cut through. Damien Callahan, his half-brother, slid into view with a smirk too polished to be sincere. "Quite the scene, brother," Damien drawled, sipping his drink. "From boardrooms to babysitting waitresses. Losing your touch?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Not now. But Damien leaned closer, eyes flicking toward Grace. "She's cute, in a simple way, but not exactly your type. Or is she just tonight's charity project?" The words stung sharper than intended. Ethan's gaze followed Grace, who was clearing another table, unaware of the daggers being spoken. His instinct rose, protective, almost primal. "Stay out of it," Ethan said, voice low, dangerous. Damien chuckled, raising his glass. "Relax, I'm only teasing. Though I must admit, seeing the great Ethan Callahan distracted by a diner girl is entertaining." He drifted away, leaving behind the bitter aftertaste of his mockery. Ethan exhaled, but his focus did not waver. Grace was still working, shoulders straight despite the whispers circling her. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan's defense of her felt absolute. Grace Whitmore was not just a passing distraction. She had already unsettled the fortress he called his heart. That night, the ballroom faded, but Grace lingered in Ethan's mind. By morning, a folder waited on his desk. Paul, his discreet investigator, had delivered it. Grace Whitmore, 26, orphaned at 19, raising her teenage sister Lily in a cramped apartment on the east side of Stamford. No scandals, no hidden debts, just a life of long hours and quiet resilience. Ethan traced the photo clipped inside. Hazel eyes, tired but proud. A waitress, a sister, a survivor. He imagined her world. Peeling paint on the walls, bills stacked on the counter, a girl doing homework under dim light while Grace worked double shifts. Her hands, calloused, unadorned, told the story of sacrifice. The contrast struck him. He, with all his power, had no one. She, with almost nothing, carried the weight of 2 lives with dignity. Ethan leaned back, the folder heavy in his hands. For the first time, the decision in his mind shifted. It wasn't about contracts anymore. Grace was not just suitable, she was worthy. And in that moment, he knew she could give him the one thing money could never buy: a future. Ethan found her the next day at a small diner, apron tied around her waist, hair pulled back in the same messy bun. She froze when she saw him at the counter. "If it's about the shirt," she said quickly, "I already told you I'll pay for the cleaning." "It's not about the shirt," Ethan replied, his voice steady. Minutes later, they sat across from each other in a quiet booth. Grace folded her arms, guarded. "So, what do you want, Mr. Callahan?" He leaned forward. "Marry me. Give me a child, an heir. In return, I'll secure your future, Lily's college, a home, anything you need, for life." Grace's breath caught. Her glass shook in her hand. "You're serious?" "I don't joke about this," Ethan said. "I don't have time to waste." Her laugh was sharp, disbelieving. "You don't even know me, and you're asking me to, what, be your wife? Have your kid? That's insane." "Maybe," he admitted, eyes never leaving hers. "But think about Lily. Think about what I can give you both. Don't take too long. Time is not on my side." Grace lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling of her small apartment. Lily slept soundly in the next room, her soft breathing a reminder of the life Grace carried on her shoulders. Ethan's words replayed in her mind. Marriage, a child, security forever. It sounded impossible, almost cruel. Her pride screamed no. She was not a contract, she was not for sale. Yet the thought of Lily's future pressed against her chest. College, safety, a chance at a life beyond struggle. Grace's hands trembled as she covered her face. Was she selfish to refuse, or foolish to accept? The offer felt like both a lifeline and a chain. To step into Ethan's world would mean abandoning the little control she still had. But to stay here meant years of exhaustion, scraping by, watching Lily suffer for every opportunity. Grace sat at the edge of her bed, her heart heavy. The choice was not just hers, it was Lily's too. And as the night dragged on, one question echoed louder than the rest. Would she say yes? The chapel was small but elegant, sunlight filtering through stained glass. Ethan stood at the altar, sharp in a black suit, unreadable. Grace walked down the aisle in a simple ivory dress borrowed from a coworker. Whispers filled the pews. Guests exchanged looks, some amused, some disdainful. Damien lounged in the back, his smirk like a knife. "From pouring coffee to Mrs. Callahan," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. A ripple of laughter followed. Grace kept her eyes forward, each step heavier than the last. She told herself this was for Lily, for survival, yet every stare felt like a weight pressing on her chest. At the altar, Ethan took her hand. His grip was steady, grounding, though his face remained cold. The officiant's words blurred together. Promises, vows, forever. When Ethan kissed her, it was brief, deliberate. Not passion, not tenderness. A statement. Damien clapped slowly, mockingly, as the guests shifted uncomfortably. Grace's cheeks burned, but she stood tall, jaw tight. The wedding was done, the contract sealed. But her heart whispered that nothing about this day felt like love. Later, in the reception room, soft music played, but Grace felt none of its warmth. She stood beside Ethan, champagne flute in hand, her smile thin and practiced. Ethan leaned closer, his words low, meant only for her. "This is a deal, Grace. Nothing more. Don't expect hearts and flowers." The sting was sharper than she expected. She forced a laugh, nodding as if it didn't matter, but inside her chest ached. She looked at him, at the rigid line of his jaw, the distance in his eyes. He was here, yet not here at all. Grace told herself she knew the terms. She agreed for Lily. She accepted for security. But, hearing it spoken aloud, so cold, cut deeper than any whisper from the crowd. She lifted her glass, sipped, and let the bubbles mask her trembling lips. Around them, people smiled and chatted, oblivious. But inside, Grace felt the walls rising higher. Walls built not by her, but by the man she had just married. The penthouse suite gleamed with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glowed beyond, alive and indifferent. Grace stood in silence, her dress hanging loose on her shoulders. The room was vast, luxurious, yet it felt suffocating. Ethan removed his tie, moving with controlled precision. He spoke little. He offered her the bedroom, then turned away, pouring himself a drink. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, the silence pressing down. She glanced at the gold fixtures, the rich fabrics, the endless view of the skyline. All of it glittered, but none of it touched her heart. The distance between them was more than physical. It was a wall she couldn't climb. When Ethan finally entered, his shirt undone, he gave her a polite nod, as if they were business partners, not husband and wife. Grace lay back, staring at the ceiling. The air felt thin, like the room itself was draining her breath. The contract had begun, but already she wondered how long she could survive inside this gilded cage. Days turned into weeks. Grace tried to settle into her new role, but the penthouse never felt like home. Ethan buried himself in work, his phone always buzzing, his eyes fixed on numbers and screens. He returned late, his shoulders heavy, his words clipped. Grace waited at dinners, silence stretching between them. He asked nothing about her. He shared nothing of himself. She watched him sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking. His hand would tremble as he lifted a glass. His face would pale, eyes clouded with something deeper than fatigue. Grace sensed he was hiding more than exhaustion. Something dark lingered beneath his control, but every time she asked, his answer was the same. "I'm fine." The distance grew thicker, a fog she couldn't break. She was his wife in name, but a stranger in truth. Grace lay awake at night, listening to the city hum beyond the windows, and one thought haunted her. What secret was Ethan keeping locked behind those walls? It happened late one evening. Ethan was walking across the living room, phone in hand, when his body betrayed him. His knees buckled. The glass slipped from his grip, shattering across the floor. Grace rushed to his side. "Ethan!" Her voice broke with panic as she caught his arm, steadying him before he collapsed completely. He tried to wave her off, his pride clawing for control. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his face was pale, his breath ragged. But the tremor in his hands, the weakness in his legs, told the truth he could no longer hide. Grace guided him to the couch, her heart pounding. For the first time, the mask slipped. The powerful billionaire, the man who commanded boardrooms and empires, now sat trembling. His shoulders bowed. She knelt beside him, eyes wide, torn between fear and fury. "You're not fine. You can't keep pretending." Ethan closed his eyes, jaw tight. The fortress he had built around himself cracked. And in that moment, Grace saw him not as the untouchable Ethan Callahan, but as a man. Vulnerable, fragile, desperately human. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Ethan leaned back against the couch, his face pale, sweat clinging to his temples. Grace sat close, her hand hovering near his, unsure if he would let her in. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, raw. "The doctors say I'm dying. 3 years, maybe less. It's why I needed all this. An heir, a legacy, before time runs out." Grace's chest tightened. She had expected cold contracts, not this, not a confession laced with fear. He looked away, ashamed. "I didn't want you to see me like this. Weak. Falling apart." Her hand touched his arm gently. "You don't need to hide it from me. Not anymore." His green eyes met hers, searching, almost disbelieving. No one had spoken to him like that. No one had cared without a price. Grace swallowed hard. She hadn't asked for this life, yet here she was, holding the broken pieces of a man the world believed unbreakable. "You're not alone," she whispered. And for the first time, Ethan let the weight of his truth rest in someone else's hands. The night stretched on. Grace stayed beside him, steady as his breathing slowed, her presence a quiet anchor. When he finally opened his eyes again, something unspoken passed between them. A shift. Her hand brushed his as she reached for the glass of water. His fingers closed around hers, firm, reluctant to let go. The air grew heavier, their eyes locked, and in that silence the contract that bound them seemed to vanish. Ethan leaned closer, hesitation flickering only once. Then his lips found hers, hungry, desperate, alive. Grace gasped against the kiss, but she didn't pull away. The walls she had built crumbled under the heat of his touch. What began as comfort became fire. The kiss deepened, raw, breaking through the cold terms of their deal. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, shaken. Grace pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "This wasn't part of the agreement," she whispered. "No," Ethan admitted, his voice rough, his gaze burning. "But maybe it should have been." In that fragile moment, the billionaire and the waitress were just two people, drawn together by something stronger than fear. The next day, the spark between them lingered, though unspoken. Grace felt it in the way his gaze lingered, softer, hesitant. But Damien was waiting. He cornered her in the hallway, his smile cruel. "Enjoying the upgrade?" From diner booths to penthouse floors, must feel like a dream. Grace stiffened. I don't owe you an answer. He leaned closer, his whisper sharp. You think Ethan loves you? You're a contract, nothing more, and when he's gone, you'll be left with nothing. Before she could respond, another voice cut deeper. Evelyn Callahan, Ethan's mother, cool and elegant, at the head of the lunch table that afternoon. Her words were colder than the silver cutlery. A waitress at my son's side. How charming. Tell me, Grace, do you even know how to hold a fork? The guests laughed softly. Grace's cheeks burned, her stomach twisted. She fought to stay composed, but each barb was another wound. She told herself she was strong. She told herself this was for Lily. Yet, as the ridicule circled her, Grace felt her pride bleeding away. The laughter around the table echoed like a cruel chorus. Grace gripped her napkin, forcing herself not to break. Then Ethan's voice cut through, sharp as steel. Enough! The room stilled. He rose to his feet, his gaze burning into his mother, then Damien. She is my wife. You will not speak to her like that. Not now. Not ever. Gasps whispered through the room. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Damien's smirk faltered. Grace blinked, tears brimming, but held back. No one had defended her like this, not since her parents died. Ethan placed a hand on her waist, grounding, protective. His voice softened only for her. You don't need to endure their poison. Not alone. Grace's throat tightened. The sting of humiliation still lingered, but his defense wrapped around her like armor. For the first time she saw a man willing to fight for her, not because of a deal, but because she mattered. A single tear escaped, sliding down her cheek, and in Ethan's fierce protection, Grace felt something bloom, the dangerous hope that this might be more than survival. Weeks passed, and the silence between them slowly filled with fragile warmth. Grace noticed small changes in her body. Fatigue heavier than usual, a missed cycle. Her hands shook as she waited for the test result. 2 pink lines appeared. Positive. Her breath caught. She pressed a hand to her stomach, eyes stinging with tears. Against all odds, she was carrying Ethan's child. That evening, she found him in his office, hunched over papers. She laid the test gently on his desk. Ethan, I'm pregnant. For a moment, he froze, unreadable. Then his face broke open, his mask shattering into something raw. He pulled her into his arms, whispering against her hair, Grace, we did it. His joy was real, fierce, almost boyish. Yet behind it, she saw the flicker of fear. His eyes, when they met hers again, carried the shadow of his diagnosis. A child meant legacy. But it also meant time was running out. Grace smiled through her tears, but deep inside, a question burned. Was this happiness the start of their salvation, or the beginning of tragedy? A week later, at the hospital, Grace sat in the waiting area while Ethan met Dr. Harris. She stroked her flat stomach, imagining the life growing within. 2 doctors passed nearby, voices hushed but clear. Harris is still pushing that degenerative story, one said, but the scans don't line up. Stress, maybe dehydration, but not fatal. The other sighed. He owes someone. Heard Damien's been sniffing around. Grace's heart stopped. She leaned closer, hidden by a plant. Every word cut like glass. Not fatal. Manipulated scans. Damien. Her world tilted. Had Ethan been living under a lie? Was all his despair, all his coldness toward her, built on a falsehood? She pressed a trembling hand to her stomach. For their child's sake, she needed answers. Grace rose quietly and slipped out of the clinic. The air outside was sharp, but not as sharp as the storm in her chest. If Damien was behind this, it wasn't just cruelty. It was betrayal deep enough to destroy everything. And Grace knew time was running short to uncover the truth. Grace could not tell Ethan, not yet, not without proof. That night, she made a discreet call. By morning, she sat in a quiet office in Greenwich across from Dr. Lena Patel, a physician known for her integrity. Grace handed over Ethan's medical records, her fingers tight around the folder Mara had helped her obtain. Dr. Patel scanned the files, her brow furrowed. Mrs. Callahan, your husband's symptoms, dizziness, fatigue, yes, they're real. But the scans, these have been manipulated. There's no evidence of a degenerative illness. This is stress, exhaustion, not death. Grace's throat closed. Relief and rage collided inside her. Relief that Ethan wasn't dying. Rage that he had been made to believe he was. Who would do this? She whispered. Dr. Patel hesitated. Someone with access to his team. Someone with motive. You already know who. Damien's smirk flashed in Grace's memory. His poison words. His mocking presence at every turn. She left the office with her pulse pounding, clutching the truth like a weapon. Now she had to decide. Tell Ethan immediately, or find irrefutable proof to shatter Damien's lies once and for all. Grace met Paul, Ethan's trusted investigator, in a dim cafe on the east side. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she told him what she'd learned. Hours later, he returned with a thin envelope. "You need to see this," he said. Inside were bank records, emails, even a recorded call. Damien's voice was clear. "Make it convincing, Harris. He needs to believe he's dying." Grace's stomach turned. Damien hadn't just mocked Ethan, he had orchestrated his downfall. Her heart pounded as she gripped the papers. She imagined Ethan, alone in his penthouse, believing his life was ending. She imagined the weight he carried, the coldness he built to protect himself. All because of a lie. Tears blurred her vision, but resolve hardened beneath them. That night, Grace stood at the door of their home, the envelope clutched in her hand. She was done hiding. Ethan deserved the truth, even if it broke him. Ethan paced his office, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders to Mara. "Damien doesn't get a vote in this. I don't care what he says." Grace entered quietly, setting the envelope on the desk, her face pale, her voice steady. "Ethan, we need to talk." He turned, frowning at her tone. "What is it?" She pushed the envelope forward. "Your diagnosis. It isn't real. Damien paid Harris to fake it." Ethan's eyes narrowed, disbelief flaring. "What are you talking about?" "Listen," Grace said, opening the file, playing the recording. Damien's voice spilled into the room, cruel and clear. Ethan froze. His hands trembled as he gripped the desk. His breath came sharp, uneven. "All this time," he whispered, "I thought I was dying. I built my life around a lie." The papers slipped from his hands, scattering across the floor. His chest heaved, his face twisted with rage and grief. Grace reached for him, but he pulled back, eyes burning. The betrayal crushed him. Not just Damien's treachery, but the weight of years lost to fear. And for the first time, Ethan Callahan looked utterly broken. The office door slammed open. Damien stormed in, his face twisted with fury. His eyes burned as they locked on Grace. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" he spat. "You had to dig. You had to ruin everything." Grace stepped back, her hands trembling. Damien's voice grew louder, crueler. "You're nothing but a diner girl playing wife. You think you belong here?" He lunged, hand raised as if to strike her. Grace gasped, stumbling against the desk. Before the blow could land, Ethan roared. His body collided with Damien's, slamming him against the wall. "Touch her again," Ethan growled, his voice ice and fire, "and you're finished." Damien struggled, but Ethan's grip was iron. The years of restraint broke in that moment. Fury, betrayal, and love for Grace surged through him like a storm. "Get out," Ethan snarled. "If you ever come near my wife again, I'll make sure you regret the day you were born." Damien's smirk faltered. He shoved free and fled, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Grace's ragged breaths, and Ethan's arms, strong and protective, wrapped around her trembling frame. Grace's heart pounded, tears burning her eyes as Ethan pulled her close. She pressed her face to his chest, his shirt damp with sweat, his heartbeat fierce beneath her ear. "I was so scared," she whispered, "not of him, of losing you, of this all being a lie." Ethan cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. His gaze was steady, raw with emotion. "Listen to me, Grace. No one touches you. No one. Not Damien. Not anyone. You are mine. You are safe." Her tears spilled freely now, relief crashing through her chest. She clung to him, trembling, finally letting go of the fear she carried for so long. Ethan held her tighter, his voice a vow. "I failed to protect so much in my life, but I will never fail you, or our child." Grace sobbed softly, but in his arms the fear began to ease. She felt the strength of his promise, the weight of his love, more powerful than any empire he had ever built. For the first time, the marriage no longer felt like a contract. It felt like a bond. Days later, the Harborview boardroom filled with tense silence. Every executive sat waiting, eyes on Ethan. Damien slouched at the end of the table, his confidence brittle. Ethan laid the evidence down, emails, bank transfers, and the damning recording. Damien's voice echoed through the room. "Make it convincing. He needs to believe he's dying. Gasps rose. The board members shifted, whispers of disgust filling the space. "You betrayed not just me," Ethan said coldly, his eyes locked on Damien, "but the entire Callahan name. You tried to break me, but you underestimated her." He nodded toward Grace, who stood quietly at his side. The vote was swift. Damien was stripped of power, his shares seized. He was escorted out, his face pale, his smirk gone. As for Dr. Harris, his license was revoked within weeks. His name dragged through headlines, his career in ashes. Ethan sat at the head of the table, shoulders square, but his eyes softened when they found Grace. Justice had been delivered, but the true victory was not in the boardroom. It was standing beside him, steady and unshaken, holding his hand under the table. Spring came, and with it, a cry that changed everything. Grace clutched Ethan's hand as the doctor placed a newborn boy in her arms. "Liam," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking as he touched his son's tiny fingers. The baby's eyes, a brilliant green, blinked up at him. Tears spilled down Ethan's face. The billionaire who once lived for control now trembled with awe. "He's perfect," he breathed. Grace smiled through exhaustion, pressing Liam gently to her chest. "Our boy." Ethan gathered them both close, his heart overflowing. In that moment, he was no longer just the heir to an empire. He was a husband, a father, a man reborn. The penthouse echoed not with silence but with laughter, soft lullabies, and the warmth of family. Ethan found himself rising at night to rock Liam, humming off-key songs, kissing Grace's forehead when she fell asleep beside the crib. The empire still existed, but it was no longer his world. His world was here, in the small, fragile heartbeat of his son and the steadfast love of the woman who had saved him. One evening, the sun dipped low over their estate, painting the sky gold. Ethan sat on the terrace, Grace by his side, Liam asleep in her arms. He looked at them, his voice soft but steady. "Grace, you gave me everything, not just an heir. You gave me a family, a life worth living." She turned, her hazel eyes shimmering with love. "And you gave me the same. We found each other." Ethan kissed her gently, his hand resting over Liam's small form. For once there was no fear, no clock ticking down, no shadows of betrayal. Only peace. The man who once thought he was dying had been given something greater than years. He had been given love. And the truth was clear. Money and power meant nothing without family. If you believe true love can change a life, leave a comment. I believe in love. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story that might touch your heart. Because sometimes love doesn't just save us, it gives us life all over again.